I'm 28 years old and I just had gallbladder surgery 3 weeks ago. Not some minor procedure either. Mine had complications because I waited too long, thinking the pain would go away on its own. When I woke up in recovery, groggy and nauseous, I expected to see at least one family member. My mom, maybe my sister Kristen. Hell, even my brother Leroy, who never visited me for anything. The recovery room was empty except for nurses. I figured they were getting coffee or parking or whatever. Then my nurse came over with this uncomfortable expression and told me my father Roland had called the nurses station. She looked like she didn't want to tell me what he said, but hospital policy required it. He told her to relay a message. Tell that loser we're done babysitting. Real men don't cry over pain. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't process it. The anesthesia was still in my system and I thought maybe I misheard. I asked her to repeat it. She did, word for word. Then she handed me my phone that had been in the locked cabinet and there were 17 missed calls from my mom Fiona. But when I tried calling back, it went straight to a number disconnected message. The surgeon came by an hour later and told me everything went fine, but I needed someone to drive me home and stay with me for at least 24 hours because of the anesthesia. I told him my family would be there soon. I waited another 2 hours in that recovery room, texting my siblings, calling my parents' landline, trying everything. Nothing. A nurse finally told me they were discharging me, and I needed to make arrangements. I ended up taking an Uber home at 8 p.m., clutching my surgical wounds, trying not to vomit in someone's Nissan Altima. When I got to my parents' house where I'd been staying the past month while my apartment lease ended, the locks were changed. My key didn't work. I stood there for 10 minutes trying to make sense of it before my phone buzzed. Text from my mother. You're 28, not a baby. Stop being a burden. We raised you, now disappear. Let me give you the backstory because otherwise this sounds insane. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. My brother Leroy is 25 and works part-time at a warehouse when he feels like it. My sister Kristen is 26 and quit her job 8 months ago to find herself or whatever. I've been the responsible one since I was 16. I worked through college, got a decent job in logistics management, and yeah, I helped my family financially. A lot. Because that's what you do, right? 2 years ago when my dad had his hours cut and my mom's catering side business tanked, I bought them a house. Not helped with the down payment. Bought the house. It's in my name because their credit was trashed from medical bills and my dad's gambling phase 5 years back that we don't talk about. I covered the mortgage, property taxes, everything. They lived there rent-free. My siblings moved in with them when their living situations fell apart. Also rent-free on my dime. I never threw it in their faces. I never demanded gratitude. I just wanted my family stable and happy. But somewhere along the way, they started resenting me for it. My dad would make comments about how I thought I was better than everyone. My mom told her friends I was controlling. Leroy posted on Facebook once about how his brother bought their parents a house just to lord it over them. I ignored it all because I told myself they were stressed and adjusting. The gallbladder thing started 2 months ago. Severe pain, nausea, the works. I mentioned it at a family dinner and my dad said I was being dramatic. My mom said young people don't have gallbladder problems and I probably just ate something bad. When I finally went to the doctor and they scheduled emergency surgery, I told my family and my dad's response was asking if I really needed surgery or if this was me being a hypochondriac again. Again. Like I had a history of making up medical issues. So I'm standing outside this house that I own, locked out, recovering from surgery, and my phone keeps buzzing. My brother posted on Facebook, "My pathetic brother thinks surgery makes him special. What a snowflake," with a crying, laughing emoji. 43 people liked it, including my aunt and 2 cousins. My sister added her own post an hour later. Finally free from the family disappointment, with a champagne emoji and a peace sign. I got an Uber to a hotel because what else was I going to do? Checked into a Holiday Inn with my hospital discharge papers and pain medication. I was lying in that hotel bed, surgical wounds throbbing, and my phone lit up with a notification. Our family group chat that I'd been muted in for weeks apparently came alive. My mom posted beach vacation photos, all 4 of them, my parents and both siblings, on a beach somewhere with tropical drinks. The caption, "Sometimes you have to cut dead weight to really enjoy life." More photos, my dad doing a toast with a beer, Kristen in a bikini doing a peace sign, Leroy flexing on a jet ski. This vacation had been planned. They knew about my surgery date 3 weeks in advance and they planned a vacation during it. The group chat exploded with relatives commenting about how good everyone looked, how they deserved the break, asking what resort they were at. Then my dad posted a photo of medical billing statements. My medical billing statements. He must have grabbed them from my room before they locked me out. The caption, "Look what this failure cost us, nothing." We didn't pay, with laughing emojis. He posted my private medical information with my name visible to 300 Facebook friends. I'm not going to lie to you all reading this, something snapped. Not in a breakdown way, but in a clarity way. I'd spent 10 years being the responsible one, the provider, the safety net. I put my own life on hold to make sure they were comfortable. And the second I needed them, the second I was vulnerable, they didn't just abandon me. They mocked me publicly. They celebrated my pain. I'm angry. I've been angry for 3 weeks sitting in this hotel room, planning my next moves. You want to know what I did that night after seeing those posts? I made one phone call. One single phone call that set everything in motion. Here's something they forgot in their rush to humiliate me. That house they're living in? Mine. The car my dad drives? Financed through me as a co-signer when his credit couldn't get approved. My mom's credit cards that she uses for her catering supplies? I'm an authorized user who pays the bills. My brother's phone? Family plan under my name. Everything they have, everything they use, everything they've built their comfortable life on runs through me. That night in the hotel, I called my lawyer. Yeah, I have a lawyer. When you buy property and manage family finances, you need one. I explained the situation, sent him screenshots of everything, and asked what my options were. He told me, all of them, legal, binding, and absolutely within my rights. I started making changes, financial changes, legal changes, the kind that don't happen overnight, but once they start, they can't be stopped. I wasn't trying to hurt them. I was removing myself from their lives like they asked. They wanted me gone. They got their wish. But they were about to learn what gone actually meant. The beach vacation lasted 5 days. They posted constantly, rubbing it in, making sure I saw every moment of their family bonding time without the disappointment sun. Then they came home. Based on the timeline, they probably got back to the house Tuesday evening. I imagine my dad tried his key. I imagine they tried the garage door opener. I imagine my mother's face when she realized the locks had been changed. By me. On my house. That I own. My phone started ringing around 9 p.m. that Tuesday. My dad called 16 times. My mom called 23 times. Texts flooded in. Voicemails full of screaming about how I couldn't do this, how they had rights, how I was going to regret this. My brother threatened to break down the door. My sister cried about all her stuff being inside. I didn't answer any of them. They spent that night in a hotel. Probably the same Holiday Inn chain I'd stayed at. Poetic, in a way. The calls and texts continued for days. They got nasty. My dad threatened legal action. My mom sent paragraphs about how I was destroying the family. Leroy said I'd regret being petty. Kristen called me every name she could think of. I didn't respond to any of it. I just let my lawyer handle everything. Then things escalated yesterday in a way I didn't expect. The medical complications from my surgery that the doctors warned me about? They happened. The pain I'd been managing got worse. Way worse. I ended up back in the emergency room Wednesday night. They admitted me to the ICU for monitoring because my vitals were unstable and they were worried about infection. Here's where it gets interesting and why I'm posting this now from my ICU bed. I was barely conscious when they brought me in. The nurses needed to call my emergency contacts. Guess whose names were still in my hospital file from the original surgery? My family's, all 4 of them. The hospital called them to inform them I was in critical condition in the ICU. That's protocol, apparently. They didn't know about the family situation. They just knew next of kin needed to be notified when someone's in intensive care. My family showed up 30 minutes later. All of them. From what the nurses told me this morning, they came running into the hospital at 11 p.m. screaming about needing to see me. Security got involved because they were causing a scene in the lobby. They demanded to know if I was alive, what was wrong, why they couldn't come up. Here's the thing about ICU visitation. The patient has to approve visitors. When I was coherent enough around 2 a.m., a nurse asked if I wanted to add anyone to my approved visitor list. I said no. She asked if I was sure. Mentioned my family was in the waiting area. I said I was very sure. She updated the system. So right now, as I'm typing this Thursday afternoon, they're still here. They've been here for almost 15 hours. Security won't let them up without my approval. My dad has tried 3 times to force his way past the security desk. My mom is apparently sobbing in the waiting area. My siblings keep trying to convince nurses to sneak them information. They want to know if I'm dying. They want to know what's wrong. They want to know why I won't see them. The nurses won't tell them anything because of HIPAA, and because I specifically said not to. And you know what? I'm not dying. The infection is being treated with antibiotics. I'll be discharged in a couple days. But they don't know that. They're sitting down there terrified that I might die, and they won't even get to say whatever they want to say. Maybe apologize, maybe demand I fix everything, maybe both. I can hear them sometimes through the ICU doors. Not words, but sounds. Someone crying. Someone's voice raised in argument with security. My nurse mentioned they've been asked to leave multiple times, but they refuse. They're camping in the waiting area, taking shifts, desperately trying to get any information. Part of me, a small part, feels something about this, but mostly I'm just tired. Tired of being the one who holds everything together while getting nothing but resentment. Tired of being called a burden while I'm literally paying for their entire lives. Tired of being mocked for being in pain while they toast with champagne on a beach. They made it very clear I wasn't family anymore. They posted it publicly, celebrated it, rubbed it in my face. So now they're living with that choice. They're locked out of their house that I own. They're shut out of my hospital room that they abandoned me in 3 weeks ago. They're panicking about whether I'll survive, while I remember how they told a nurse to call me a loser who cries over pain. I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. My lawyer says I have options, a lot of them. The house situation alone is going to be complicated for them, but watching them panic in the waiting area, finally realizing there might be consequences to how they treated me, that's something. I know some of you are probably thinking I should let them in, hear them out, let them explain. But here's the thing. There is no explanation that makes any of this okay. There's no apology that erases your father calling you a loser through a hospital nurse. There's no justification for celebrating your absence while you're recovering from surgery alone in a hotel. They wanted me gone. They got their wish. Now they're learning what that actually means, and they don't like it. That's not my problem anymore. I'll update when something changes. Right now, I'm just focusing on recovering from this infection and deciding my next steps. My lawyer has some interesting suggestions about the property situation and financial entanglements. We'll see what happens. For now, they can keep waiting. They're good at that, apparently. They had no problem making me wait in that recovery room for hours. Turnabout and all that. Update 1. All right. For everyone who followed my original post and told me to keep them updated, here we go. Buckle up because the last 4 days have been absolutely wild, and I need to get this all out. First off, shout out to everyone who told me to stand my ground and not feel guilty. You were right. Also, shout out to the few people who called me petty and said family is family. You can skip this update because you're not going to like where this goes. So when I left off, my family was camped out in the ICU waiting area, losing their minds because I wouldn't let them in. That situation continued for another 18 hours. 18 hours they sat there. My dad tried to bribe a nurse with $200 to let him up. She reported him to hospital administration. My mom tried claiming she had power of attorney over my medical decisions. She doesn't. The hospital verified that real quick. I got discharged Friday morning. The infection responded to antibiotics and my vitals stabilized. The doctor cleared me to leave with prescription pain meds and antibiotics I needed to take for 10 days. The discharge nurse asked again if I wanted to notify my family who were still in the waiting area. I told her no. She actually seemed relieved because apparently my dad had been arguing with security staff all night and they were considering calling the police. Here's what I did instead. I had my lawyer meet me at the hospital. Yeah, I called him to pick me up. We walked right through the main lobby where my family was camped out. They saw me. My mom jumped up and started speed walking toward me, calling my name. My dad was right behind her. Leroy and Kristen scrambled to follow. My lawyer stepped between us and told them I wasn't speaking to them without legal representation present, and any further harassment would result in a restraining order. The look on their faces was something else. My dad started yelling about how I couldn't hide behind a lawyer from my own family. My lawyer repeated his statement and guided me out to his car. They followed us to the parking garage, my whole family running after us while my dad shouted about what a coward I was being. Security had to escort them back inside. I watched from my lawyer's BMW as my father, this man who called me a loser through a hospital nurse, completely melted down in a hospital parking garage. We went to my lawyer's office. Let me tell you what I'd already set in motion during those 3 weeks in the hotel and the days in the ICU. This wasn't impulsive anger. This was calculated action based on years of watching them take advantage of me. The house situation first. That house is 100% in my name. My parents aren't on the deed. They're not on the mortgage. They have zero legal claim to it. I had already filed eviction paperwork before I even ended up in the ICU. They were getting served that Friday, which meant they had 30 days to vacate. My lawyer explained they'd likely contest it, but since they had no lease agreement and no ownership stake, they'd lose. But here's where it gets interesting. My dad's car, the one I co-signed for 3 years ago when his credit was terrible, I'm not just a co-signer, I'm the primary on the loan because that was the only way to get it approved. The car is registered in both our names, but the loan is primarily my responsibility, which means I have legal standing to repossess it if payments aren't being made. And guess who stopped making those payments once I cut off my financial support? I'd already contacted the dealership and reported the vehicle as needing repossession due to non-payment. The phone situation was simpler. Family plan under my name, I'm the account holder. I didn't cancel their lines immediately because I wanted them to be able to reach me to see what they'd say, how they'd try to justify everything. I wanted to watch them scramble, but I downgraded all their plans to the most basic service. No data, texts and calls only. Hit them where it hurts, but keep communication open. My mom's credit cards where I'm an authorized user? I called every company and had myself removed. Those cards wouldn't work by Monday. All her catering supplies, all her purchases, all her ability to function, gone. My lawyer looked at me when I laid all this out and asked if I was sure I wanted to do this. I told him about the Facebook posts. I showed him the medical billing statements my dad published with my name visible. I explained how they planned a vacation during my surgery. He stopped asking if I was sure. Now let me explain something about my family dynamic that I didn't fully get into in my first post. Because honestly, I was still processing it all. My dad has always resented me. Not disliked, resented. When I was in high school and got good grades, he'd make comments about how I thought I was smarter than everyone. When I got into college, he told me I was wasting money on a degree that wouldn't matter. When I got my job in logistics management, he said I got lucky and it wouldn't last. The house purchased 2 years ago? That's when it really turned. I thought I was helping them, securing their future, giving them stability. But my dad saw it as his son succeeding where he failed. His son buying a house when he never could. His son having the credit and income to do what he couldn't. Every month I paid that mortgage. It reminded him that I was the provider instead of him. My mom went along with it because she's always gone along with what my dad thinks. She's never contradicted him, never stood up for me, never questioned his narrative. When he started calling me controlling for owning the house, she agreed. When he said I threw my money in their faces, she nodded along. She benefited from my support, but resented me for being in a position to provide it. My siblings? They learned from our parents. They saw that being irresponsible got them a free ride. Leroy barely works because why should he when Big Brother pays for everything? Kristen quit her job because she knew she could live rent-free on my dime. They watched our parents resent me and decided I deserved it for having my life together. That's what I was dealing with, not a family that made a mistake or had a bad moment. A family that fundamentally resented my existence because it highlighted their own failures and choices. So back to Friday afternoon in my lawyer's office. My phone was blowing up. My family had my number and they were using it. The texts started around noon. Mom, we need to talk about this house situation. You can't just kick us out. Dad, you think you're so smart with your lawyer? We have rights as tenants. Kristen, all my stuff is in that house, you're such an asshole. Leroy, bro, this is insane. You're really going to make your family homeless. I didn't respond to any of them. I watched them come in, message after message. My lawyer advised me to keep my phone on and save everything for documentation but not to engage. So I didn't. Then the voicemail started. My dad left one that was 6 minutes of him explaining how I was throwing away my family over pride, how he was disappointed in the man I'd become, how I'd regret this when they were gone and I had nobody. My mom left one crying about how she didn't understand what happened to her sweet boy who used to help people. Kristen left one calling me every name she could think of. Leroy left one threatening to fight me if I didn't fix this. I listened to all of them, every single one, and I felt nothing. Maybe that makes me cold, but after everything, I just felt nothing. Saturday, things escalated. They figured out the phone situation when their data stopped working. My dad called me from someone else's phone, a number I didn't recognize. I answered thinking it might be hospital-related. He launched into this long explanation about how everything was a misunderstanding, how the beach vacation was planned months ago and they couldn't cancel it, how the Facebook posts were just jokes that I took too seriously, how the locks being changed was for security reasons and they were going to give me a key, how they were worried sick about me in the hospital. I let him talk. He went on for probably 10 minutes, his voice shifting from apologetic to defensive to angry and back again. When he finally stopped, I asked him one question. Did he call the hospital and tell the nurse to relay that message about me being a loser? Silence. Then he said it wasn't like that. He was upset and said something stupid. He didn't mean it. I asked if he posted my medical billing statements on Facebook. More silence. Then excuses about how he was just trying to show people that they weren't responsible for my bills, that people were asking questions. I told him we were done talking and hung up. He called back immediately. I didn't answer. He called 17 more times from that number. I blocked it. Sunday, the eviction notice got served. A process server went to the house and handed the paperwork to my dad. I wasn't there, but my lawyer got confirmation it was delivered. My phone exploded again. This time the messages were different. Dad, you're really doing this? You're really going to put your parents on the street? Mom, please call me. We need to talk about this. There has to be another solution. Leroy, where are we supposed to go? You're going to make us homeless because of your ego? Kristen, I hope you're happy ruining everyone's lives. They had 30 days. 30 days to figure out their living situation. The same amount of time they spent posting beach vacation photos and mocking me on Facebook. Monday morning, the car situation came to a head. My dad's vehicle got repossessed from the driveway. A tow truck came and took it while they were inside the house. I got a notification from the loan company. My dad called me from my mom's phone, absolutely losing it. He was screaming about how I'd stolen his car, how he needed it for work, how this was illegal, how he was calling the police. I told him the car was in my name, the loan was in my name, the payments weren't being made, and it was 100% legal. He told me I was destroying the family over nothing. I reminded him that he's the one who called me a loser through a hospital nurse and told me to disappear. Then I hung up. The thing is, I'm not even the one who stopped making car payments. He did. Once I stopped funding their lifestyle, they couldn't maintain anything. The car payment was his responsibility, but it was coming out of the general money I was providing. Without that, he defaulted. I just accelerated the consequences. Tuesday, my mom's credit cards started declining. She tried to buy groceries and none of them worked. She called me crying about how she had no money, how they had no food. How could I do this to them? I reminded her that those were cards where I was an authorized user paying the bills. I'd removed myself, and the balances were her responsibility now. She said they couldn't pay those balances. I said that sounded like a her problem. She started pleading then, talking about how they raised me, how they sacrificed for me, how I owed them. I asked her what they sacrificed exactly. She couldn't answer. She just kept crying and saying this wasn't who I was. I told her she was right. This wasn't who I was. Who I was got taken advantage of for 10 years. Who I am now doesn't tolerate that anymore. Extended family started getting involved. My aunt called me Wednesday asking what was going on. My parents had apparently reached out to everyone painting themselves as victims of their ungrateful son. My aunt tried the whole family guilt trip routine. I sent her screenshots of the Facebook posts. She stopped calling. 2 cousins messaged me with similar stories. I sent them the same screenshots. One of them responded asking why my parents would do that. I told them to ask my parents. The other one just stopped responding. Here's what nobody in my family expected. That I'd been thinking about this possibility for 2 years. Ever since I bought that house and saw how they reacted, part of me knew it might come to this. I didn't want it to, but I knew it could. So I made sure everything was in my name. Everything was documented. Everything was legally protected. I wasn't naive enough to think family meant they wouldn't turn on me. They proved me right. My lawyer told me Wednesday afternoon that they'd likely try to fight the eviction, that they'd claim tenant rights even without a lease, that it could get messy. I told him to do whatever needed to be done. I'm not backing down. They made their choice when they celebrated my absence on a beach while I recovered from surgery alone in a hotel. The last 4 days have been them scrambling, trying to fix what they broke, attempting to manipulate me back into funding their lives. But I'm done. They wanted me gone? They got it. They just didn't realize that me being gone meant taking everything I provided with me. They're still calling, still texting, still trying. I'm still not responding beyond what my lawyer advises. They have 26 days left in that house. No car, no credit cards, no phone data, no financial support, just the consequences of their own actions finally catching up to them. Some of you are probably thinking I'm going too far, that this is cruel, but you didn't see my dad's face when he mocked me on Facebook. You didn't read my sister calling me a disappointment for having surgery. You didn't watch them toast with champagne while I was alone in a hotel room, barely able to move. This isn't me being petty. This is me removing myself from their lives like they explicitly told me to. They just assumed I'd take myself and leave everything I'd given them behind. That's not how this works. I'll update again when something significant happens. Right now, I'm just waiting out this eviction period and watching them realize what their lives look like without me in it. Spoiler alert, it's not looking great for them. Update 2. Okay, so a lot has happened in the past week and a half, and I need to get this all down while it's fresh. Also, thank you to everyone following this saga. Your support has been keeping me sane through this absolute nightmare of family drama. Quick recap for anyone just joining. I'm the son who bought my family a house, paid for everything, got called a loser through a hospital nurse by my dad during surgery recovery, got locked out of said house, and am now evicting them. We're 16 days into their 30-day eviction notice, and things have gotten messy. So where I left off, they were scrambling without the car, without credit cards, with basic phone service, and with the reality that they actually have to leave the house sinking in. I thought maybe they'd use this time to find a new place, figure out their finances, start dealing with reality. I was wrong. They've been spending their energy trying to manipulate and pressure me. Instead, day 8 of the eviction period, my dad showed up at my workplace. Yeah, my workplace. I work in logistics management at a distribution center, and we have security at the front desk. He somehow got past them by claiming he was there for a delivery consultation, which is a thing we do with potential clients. So they let him into the lobby. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with a text from reception saying my father was in the lobby asking to see me. My first thought was wondering how he even knew where I worked. But then I remembered I'd mentioned the company name at family dinners before all this went down. I told reception I'd be down in 10 minutes. I wasn't going to hide from him, but I also wasn't going to drop everything and run. I finished my meeting and went downstairs. He was sitting in the lobby chairs wearing his best button-down shirt, the one he saves for funerals and court appearances. He stood up when he saw me, and I could see he'd prepared for this. He had this whole speech ready. He started by saying he wasn't there to argue or cause a scene. He just wanted to talk man-to-man without lawyers or distractions. He said the house situation was complicated, but they were willing to work with me. They could start paying rent if I'd give them time to get their finances together. Maybe we could work out a lease agreement that made sense for everyone. He kept using words like family and understanding and compromise. I asked him how much rent they were proposing. He said they'd need a few months to get stable, but maybe $500 a month to start. $500 a month for a 4-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood. The mortgage alone is $1,800. I asked him where they planned to get $500. He said Leroy was picking up more shifts, and Kristen was looking for work, and they'd figure it out together as a family. Then he pivoted to the emotional manipulation. He talked about how mom was having trouble sleeping, how stressed everyone was, how this was affecting the whole family's mental health. He said I was angry, and he understood that what they did was wrong. But this reaction was disproportionate. He actually used that word, disproportionate. I stood there in my company lobby listening to this man who told a hospital nurse to call me a loser, try to negotiate, paying me a quarter of my mortgage payment after living rent-free for 2 years. I asked him if he remembered what he said to that nurse. He got defensive immediately, said he was stressed and frustrated, and I was being dramatic about the surgery, and he snapped. That it was one comment in a moment of weakness and I was holding it over him forever. I asked him about the Facebook posts, about the beach vacation, about the champagne toasts, about posting my medical billing information publicly. He said those were misunderstandings, that social media doesn't show the full context, that they were just trying to enjoy a family vacation they'd planned for months. He said I was reading malice into things that weren't meant that way. This is what they do. This is what they've always done. Rewrite history, minimize their actions, make me the unreasonable one for being hurt. I told him the eviction was proceeding as scheduled and walked away. He called after me asking if I was really going to let pride destroy our family. I didn't turn around. Security escorted him out after that. I had to explain to my manager what was going on because having family drama show up at work isn't exactly professional. My manager was actually pretty understanding but made it clear this couldn't happen again. Great. So now my family drama is affecting my job. Day 9, my mom tried a different approach. She sent me a Facebook message that was 3 paragraphs long about how she'd been thinking about everything, and she realized they hadn't been appreciative enough of what I'd done for them. How taking care of family goes both ways, and they'd failed to take care of me when I needed them. How she was sorry and wanted to make things right. It was a good apology. Well written, almost convincing, except it came with a request at the end. Could I please extend the eviction deadline by 60 days so they could find appropriate housing? Could I please return the car so Dad could get to job interviews? Could I please restore the credit cards just until they got on their feet? She wanted me to give back everything I'd taken while they figured out their next move. The apology wasn't about making amends. It was about buying time and restoring their comfortable situation. I didn't respond. Day 10, Kristen showed up at the grocery store I shop at on Thursday evenings. I don't think this was a coincidence. I think she'd been tracking my patterns, maybe asking around, definitely stalking my social media to figure out my routine. She was waiting by the produce section when I walked in. She approached me all friendly-like, acting like we'd just randomly bumped into each other. Said she was so glad to see me, that she'd been wanting to talk, that maybe we could grab coffee and discuss everything calmly. I kept walking and she followed me through the store, talking the entire time. She tried the sister angle first. Talked about how we'd been close as kids, how she'd always looked up to me, how she couldn't believe we'd let things get this bad. I reminded her she'd posted on Facebook calling me the family disappointment. She said that was just her venting in the moment, that she didn't really mean it, that everyone says things they regret on social media. Then she shifted to desperation, said they'd been looking for apartments but nobody would rent to them because Mom and Dad's credit was too damaged and none of them had recent pay stubs. that they'd applied to 15 places and got rejected by all of them, that Leroy had been staying with a friend but that wasn't going to last, that she'd been sleeping on an air mattress at someone's house. I asked her whose fault that was. She got angry then, said I was being cruel and punishing everyone for what Mom and Dad did, that she and Leroy didn't deserve this. I reminded her about her Facebook post. She said that was nothing compared to what I was doing to them now. We were in the cereal aisle at this point, and other shoppers were definitely watching. She raised her voice asking how I could live with myself, knowing my family was about to be homeless. I told her they had 14 days left to figure it out, and I had shopping to finish. She called me heartless and stormed out. Day 12. My dad hired a lawyer. Not a good one, I'm guessing, because the letter they sent was full of arguments that wouldn't hold up. They claimed tenant rights based on residency duration. They claimed I'd created a verbal lease agreement by accepting their presence in the house. They claimed emotional distress damages from my actions. My lawyer responded with copies of the deed, the lack of any rental payments in the bank records, and a very polite explanation of how eviction law actually works. But here's the thing, and my lawyer warned me about this, fighting the eviction is going to slow things down. Even though they'll lose, it buys them time. Instead of 30 days, we're looking at 45 to 60 days before I can actually get them out. They're using the legal system to extend their free housing. Day 13, I found out they've been telling extended family a completely different story. My cousin Zoe called me because she'd heard from my aunt that I was evicting my parents over a minor argument, that I'd taken the car and canceled the credit cards because Dad had criticized my career choices, that they were desperately trying to reconcile, but I was refusing to communicate. I sent Zoe the screenshots, the Facebook posts, the texts, the medical billing statement Dad posted publicly, all of it. She called me back 20 minutes later, absolutely furious at them. Said she couldn't believe they were lying to everyone. Said she'd been about to offer them money to help with rent. I told her not to give them anything because it would just enable them to keep avoiding reality. Apparently, they've been hitting up every relative they can for money. My aunt gave them $800. My uncle gave them $500. Two cousins sent them grocery money. They've collected at least $2,000 from family members by playing the victim and lying about what actually happened. Day 14, things took a turn. I got a call from my mom's sister, my Aunt Haven, who I haven't spoken to in probably 5 years. She lives 2 states away and mostly stays out of family drama. She told me my mom had called her crying, asking if she could move in with her temporarily. Aunt Haven said no because she has her own family and doesn't have space, but wanted to know what was really going on. I explained the whole situation. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a minute. Then she told me something I didn't know. She said my dad has been jealous of me since I graduated college. That my mom had told her years ago how hard it was for Dad to watch me succeed when he'd struggled his whole life. That they loved me, but also resented that I'd surpassed them. She said my mom had specifically complained about how I'd bought them a house, which was wonderful, but also made them feel like failures. How every mortgage payment I made was a reminder that they couldn't do it themselves. How they felt like they were living in their son's charity case instead of their own home. I asked why nobody had ever told me this. She said it wasn't her place and she thought they'd work through it. She said buying them the house might have been a mistake, not because it wasn't generous, but because it fundamentally changed the family power dynamic in a way my parents couldn't handle. This messed with my head, honestly. Not because it made me regret my actions now, but because it explained so much. The resentment, the cruelty, the celebration when I was vulnerable. They'd been building up anger at me for years because I succeeded where they failed and then had the audacity to help them with my success. Day 15, Leroy sent me a long Instagram message. This was different from the others. He actually acknowledged that what they did was wrong. Said the Facebook posts were messed up and he regretted his part in it. Said he'd been caught up in family groupthink and hadn't thought about how his actions would affect me. Then he asked me to consider that Kristen and him were collateral damage, that we were siblings and shouldn't let our parents' dysfunction destroy our relationship. That he understood why I was angry at Mom and Dad, but didn't understand why he and Kristen had to suffer for it. I thought about this for a while. He had a point in some ways, but then I remembered that he posted calling me pathetic. He called me a snowflake for having surgery. He was right there on that beach drinking champagne while I was in a hotel recovering. He wasn't some innocent bystander. He actively participated. I responded asking him how him and Kristen were planning to support themselves once the eviction went through. He said that was the problem. They couldn't afford anything on their own. I asked why that was my responsibility to solve. He said it wasn't, but I was the only one with the means to help, and didn't that count for anything? There it was. Even in his apology, even in his acknowledgement of wrongdoing, he still expected me to be their safety net. Still expected that my success meant I owed them comfort. Still couldn't conceive of a world where they had to deal with consequences without me cushioning the blow. I told him they had 14 days to figure out their living situations, and I wasn't extending the deadline or providing financial help. He responded with 3 messages calling me various names and saying I'd regret this when I was old and alone, with no family. I blocked him on Instagram after that. Day 16, which is today, I got a call from my lawyer. The eviction hearing is scheduled for day 24. We'll go before a judge, they'll make their arguments about tenant rights, we'll present the documentation showing they have no legal claim, and the judge will rule. My lawyer is confident we'll win, but said to be prepared for them to make an emotional scene in court. My dad called me tonight from yet another unknown number. I answered because I'm tired of the games. He started by asking if I was happy now that I'd turned the whole family against each other. I told him he did that when he called me a loser through a hospital nurse. He said I was never going to let that go, was I? I said, probably not. He told me they found a rental house that would take them, but they needed first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. $4,500 total. He asked if I'd be willing to loan them the money. Loan, not give, loan. Like they'd ever pay me back. Like they'd paid me back for the 2 years of free housing and the car payments and the credit card bills. I asked him where they planned to get money for monthly rent after move-in. He said Leroy was working full-time now, and Kristen had some job prospects and they'd figure it out. I asked what he and Mom were contributing. He said at their age it was hard to find work, but they'd help however they could. So basically, they expected Leroy's warehouse job to support 4 adults. I told him no. He said I was condemning them to homelessness over pride. I said I was removing myself from their lives like they told me to, and this is what that looked like. He said they didn't mean I should stop helping them financially. They just meant I should stop being controlling. I asked how I was controlling by paying for their entire lifestyle. He couldn't answer that. He tried the dad card then. Said that no matter what happened between us, he was still my father, and that meant something. Said family forgives and moves forward. I asked if he'd forgive me if I publicly posted his private medical information on Facebook. Silence. I asked if he'd forgive me if I planned a vacation during his surgery and then mocked him online for needing medical care. More silence. I told him that they had 13 days and hung up. He's called back 4 times tonight. I'm not answering. So here we are. 13 days until they have to be out. They're fighting it legally, which will drag things out, but they'll lose. They've collected money from relatives under false pretenses. They've tried every manipulation tactic they can think of. They've attempted ambushing me at work, at the grocery store, through messages, through extended family, and I'm done feeling guilty about it. They created this situation. They chose cruelty when I was vulnerable. They chose to resent me for helping them instead of being grateful. They chose to see my success as an insult instead of an opportunity. They chose all of this. Now they're living with the consequences, and they're shocked that consequences exist. That's not my problem anymore. That's theirs. I'll update after the court hearing on day 24. I have a feeling that's when things are really going to explode. Final update. All right, everyone, this is probably going to be my last update on this situation because it's essentially over now. For those following along, this is the conclusion to my family deciding I wasn't worth their time during my surgery and learning what happens when you cut off the person funding your entire existence. The court hearing happened on day 24, like scheduled. I need to walk you through this because it was honestly surreal watching my family try to argue their case in front of a judge. We showed up at the courthouse at 9 a.m. My lawyer and I got there early and were waiting in the hallway when my family arrived. All 4 of them dressed up like they were going to church. My mom was crying before we even entered the courtroom. My dad had this stern expression like he was the wronged party here. Leroy looked angry. Kristen wouldn't make eye contact with me. Their lawyer was this guy who looked fresh out of law school. Cheap suit, nervous energy, kept shuffling papers. My lawyer knew him apparently and told me this was probably his 3rd eviction case ever. Not great odds for them. The hearing itself lasted about 45 minutes. Their lawyer argued that my parents had established residency for over 2 years, which created an implied tenancy, that I'd accepted their presence without formal rent, which constituted a verbal agreement, that evicting them without cause was wrongful termination of this tenancy. He used a lot of legal words that sounded impressive but didn't actually apply to the situation. My lawyer presented the deed showing sole ownership, bank statements showing 0 rental payments in 24 months, the lack of any written lease agreement, the documentation that I'd provided, written notice of eviction as required by law. He was calm and factual, and every point he made was backed by documents. Then the judge asked my parents directly why they believed they had tenant rights. My dad stood up and launched into this whole speech about how he's my father, how I bought the house for them, how it was always meant to be their home. He talked about family obligation and how you don't just throw your parents out on the street. He made it sound like I was this cruel son abandoning his elderly parents. The judge asked him if he'd paid any rent. My dad said no because it was a family arrangement. The judge asked if he had any written agreement stating the house was meant for him. My dad said it was an understanding between family members. The judge asked if he had any legal claim to the property. My dad started getting emotional and said, legal claims shouldn't matter when it's your own son. My mom started crying harder. Kristen put her arm around her. The judge asked if anyone else had anything to add to the legal argument. Their lawyer said something about good faith tenancy. My lawyer countered with property law precedent. The judge ruled in my favor. Took him about 30 seconds. He said that without a lease agreement, without rental payments, and without any legal claim to the property, my family were guests in my home, and I had every right to ask them to leave. He gave them until day 30 to vacate and warned that if they weren't out by then, the sheriff would enforce the eviction. My dad stood up and started arguing with the judge. Said this was a miscarriage of justice. Said the legal system was supposed to protect families, not destroy them. The judge told him to sit down and warned him about contempt of court. My mom was full-on sobbing. Leroy was glaring at me like he wanted to jump across the courtroom. Kristen looked like she might throw up. We left the courthouse and my family followed us to the parking lot. My dad was yelling about how I'd won the battle but lost the war, how I'd never have a family again, how I'd destroyed everything over my ego. My lawyer told them to stop harassing me or he'd file for a restraining order. They backed off, but my dad kept yelling as we drove away. Days 25 through 29 were chaos. My phone was constant notifications, texts, calls, voicemails, Facebook messages, Instagram DMs. Everyone had something to say. My mom sent me voice messages begging me to reconsider. She said they'd found a rental but needed help with the deposit, that they'd pay me back over time, that she was sorry for everything and just needed one more chance. She sent 12 voice messages. I listened to all of them, didn't respond to any. Leroy texted me that he'd gotten approved for an apartment but could only afford a one-bedroom and nowhere would take all 4 of them. He said Kristen was going to stay with a friend, but it was only temporary, that mom and dad had nowhere to go and it was on me if they ended up in a shelter. I didn't respond. Kristen sent me a long message about how I'd proven I was exactly what they always said I was. Controlling and manipulative and cruel. That using money as a weapon made me no better than them. That she hoped I was happy with myself. I didn't respond to that either. My dad kept calling from different numbers. I stopped answering, but he left voicemails. Each one was him cycling through anger, bargaining, guilt-tripping, and back to anger. In one, he said I was dead to him. In the next, he said he forgave me and wanted to talk things through. In another, he said I'd regret this when they were gone. I saved all of them, but didn't respond. Extended family got involved again. My aunt called saying she'd heard about the court ruling and was disappointed in me. I asked if she'd heard the full story. She said it didn't matter what happened. You don't make your parents homeless? I asked if she'd take them in. She said she didn't have room, but that wasn't the point. I asked what the point was then. She couldn't answer that. Day 28, 3 days before the deadline, Leroy showed up at my apartment. I don't know how he got my address. I moved right after getting out of the hotel and never told them where. He must have followed me at some point or got it from someone. He knocked on my door at 7 p.m. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He asked if we could talk. I said we could talk right there in the doorway. He tried the brother angle first. Said we'd been close growing up. Said he remembered when I taught him to ride a bike and helped him with homework. Said that guy wouldn't do this to his family. I told him that guy got called pathetic and a snowflake on Facebook by his brother while recovering from surgery. Leroy said he regretted that. Said he was caught up in family drama and said things he didn't mean. I asked if he meant them when he posted them. He said he was angry. I asked what he was angry about. He said I'd been acting like I was better than everyone just because I had money. I asked how I'd acted that way. He couldn't give me specific examples. So I gave him examples. I reminded him about every family dinner where I picked up the check. Every time he needed gas money and I sent it. Every Christmas where I bought gifts for everyone. Every crisis where I showed up with money or help or whatever was needed. I asked him which of those things made him think I was acting superior. He got defensive. Said it wasn't about the specific things. It was about the attitude. The way I'd swoop in and fix things like I was the only one who could. Like they were all helpless without me. I asked him if they weren't helpless without me given that they currently had 6 days to move out and nowhere to go. That made him angry. He said I'd created this situation by cutting them off, that they'd been fine before. I reminded him they'd been fine because I was paying for everything. That fine meant living rent-free in my house, driving a car I paid for, using credit cards I paid for, having phone service I paid for, that the second I stopped funding their lifestyle, everything collapsed. That proved they weren't fine. They were dependent. He said I was twisting things. I asked him how. He said families help each other, and I'd turned that into a weapon. I said families also don't mock each other on social media during medical recovery. He said I needed to let that go. I said I'd let it go when they faced consequences for it. He said this was the consequences, and it was too much. We went back and forth for probably 20 minutes in my doorway. Him trying to convince me to give them more time or money or help. Me reminding him of everything that led to this moment. Eventually, he gave up and left. Said I'd have to live with this choice forever. I said I was fine with that. Day 29. One day before the eviction deadline, my mom tried one last time. She showed up at my workplace again. Security called me, but this time I didn't come down. I told them to tell her to leave. She refused. She stood in the lobby for 2 hours until my manager threatened to call the police. She left crying. She texted me afterward. Said she just wanted to see her son one more time. Said she couldn't believe it had come to this. Said she didn't know where they were going to sleep tomorrow night. I didn't respond. Day 30. Eviction day. I didn't go to the house. I sent my lawyer and had him hire a professional moving company to remove everything from the property and put it in storage. Cost me $1,500, but I wanted it done legally and completely. My lawyer texted me updates throughout the day. The moving company showed up at 8 a.m. with a sheriff's deputy to enforce the eviction. My family was still in the house. They'd stayed there until the very last minute, hoping I'd change my mind. My dad tried to argue with the deputy, said he had nowhere to go and they couldn't force him out. The deputy explained that the eviction was legal and enforced by the court, and he had 1 hour to gather essential items and leave or be arrested for trespassing. My dad left. The movers boxed up everything: furniture, clothes, personal items, kitchen stuff, all of it. Loaded it into trucks and took it to a storage unit I'd rented for 3 months. I paid for 3 months because I'm not completely heartless despite what they think. After that, the storage fees are on them. My lawyer changed all the locks again and had a security system installed. The house is empty now. I'm deciding whether to sell it or rent it to actual tenants who'll pay market rate. Haven't made up my mind yet. My family spent that first night at a budget motel according to some mutual acquaintances. They're using the money they collected from relatives. Last I heard, my parents are staying with my Aunt Haven, even though she initially said she had no room. Guess she found room when they were literally homeless. Leroy is in his one-bedroom apartment. Kristen is staying with some friend. The phone calls have mostly stopped. My dad called once from my aunt's phone to tell me he'd never forgive me. I told him I'd never asked for his forgiveness. He hung up. My mom sent one last text saying she still loved me and hoped one day I'd understand what I'd done. I didn't respond. Kristen and Leroy haven't contacted me at all since eviction day. Extended family is split. Half think I did what I had to do. Half think I went too far. I've been uninvited from 3 family events in the past week. I'm fine with that. These aren't people I need in my life anyway. My cousin Zoe, the one I sent the screenshots to, called me last week to check in. She said she understood why I did what I did, that she'd seen enough of the family dynamics over the years to know it wasn't as simple as people were making it sound. That was nice to hear, honestly. So here's where everything stands now. I'm 28 years old, I have my own apartment, my job is going well, I'm healthy after the surgery complications, and I'm completely free of my family's financial burden and emotional manipulation. I own a house that I'll either sell or rent out. I have savings again because I'm not funding 4 other adults. I have peace and quiet. They're scattered across the city in unstable housing situations they can't afford long term. They're facing the reality that without me, their comfortable life doesn't exist. They're learning what it means to actually be adults and support themselves. They're dealing with consequences. Do I feel bad? Sometimes. Not about the eviction or cutting them off, but about how it came to this. I feel bad that my family resented my success so much they'd rather mock me during surgery than be happy for me. I feel bad that helping them created so much anger. I feel bad that being responsible made me the villain in their story. But mostly, I'm angry. Still angry. That anger is what kept me going through all of this. That anger is what made me execute a plan I'd been building for 2 years just in case they ever went too far. And they did go too far. They celebrated my absence while I recovered from surgery alone in a hotel room. They posted my medical information publicly to mock me. They called me a loser through a hospital nurse. You all following this story, you get it. The comments on my first post calling me a legend, telling me to stand firm, sharing your own stories of toxic families, that helped. Knowing other people understood why I couldn't just let it go helped me stay strong when they were begging and crying and manipulating. This wasn't about revenge exactly, this was about boundaries. This was about showing them that actions have consequences. This was about refusing to be their ATM while they treated me like garbage. This was about taking back the power they'd used against me for years. That night in the ICU when they were pounding on the doors, screaming for security to tell them if I was alive, that was them finally feeling the fear and desperation I felt waking up alone after surgery. That was them experiencing what it's like to be shut out and helpless and scared. That was justice. They wanted me gone. They got their wish. They just didn't realize that me being gone meant taking everything I provided with me. Now they know. I'm done with this chapter. I'm moving forward with my life without them in it. They're surviving on their own now without my support, and honestly, that's what they always should have been doing. They're adults. They can figure it out. For everyone who followed this saga, thanks for the support. Thanks for validating that I wasn't crazy for being angry. Thanks for telling me to hold firm. I did, and I'd do it all again. Real men don't cry over pain, according to my father. But real men also don't support their family for years and then get mocked for needing medical care. Real men have boundaries. Real men don't tolerate disrespect. Real men remove toxic people from their lives even when those people are family. I'm done being their safety net. I'm done being resented for my success. I'm done being the family disappointment who also happens to pay for everything. I'm just done. They're on their own now. Exactly like they wanted. Except they're learning that on your own means actually being on your own. That's their problem now, not mine.